This is Deep Dungeon Adventure, or DDA for short. It's an MSX game that I've ported to run on the Nabu PC. The Nabu is an 8-bit computer from the early 80s. It was made in Ottawa, Canada, and it is somewhat unique in that it was designed to load its software from the cable TV network using an early implementation of a cable modem. The MSX is a line of computers that isn't super well known in North America, but was quite successful in Japan and some other parts of the world. DDA was the winner of the 2008 MSX Dev Game Development Competition, and its source code is available. The MSX and Nabu have very similar hardware, making a port fairly straightforward. They share the same Z80 CPU, the same TMS9918 graphics chip, and the same AY38910 audio chip, but they aren't identical. Software on the MSX has access to a fairly extensive library of BIOS routines available in ROM, and this isn't present on the Nabu. Also, the Nabu and the MSX use a completely different scheme for reading keyboard input. Through the process of doing this port, I learned Z80 assembly coding and all about the Nabu and the MSX. It took me a while, but ultimately it wasn't too difficult. There were a few surprises, and I've gone into a few details on the project's GitHub page. The port is almost identical to the original, including the hidden Easter egg, but I did make a couple of small changes. The biggest is the brief blood drop icon that flashes when the player takes damage from the monsters. I added it because I felt like some extra feedback was nice to have. DDA is based on a project called Whack. It's a tiny roguelike for the Commodore VIC-20 that is only 1 kilobyte in size and runs in less than 5 kilobytes of RAM. But DDA has expanded on Whack a lot. Particularly, I think DDA has some really nice art, and it's interesting that it's based on 8 pixel by 8 pixel tiles and characters. I imagine that this was a natural way for the developers to adapt Whack's single-screen text dungeons to tiles. But it's unusual for games made for 8-bit hardware to use art this size. Most games for similar systems use 16 pixels by 16 pixels as their minimum size. I like the style, and I wonder why more games don't use it. I think it's partly because it's difficult to make good art at 8 by 8, but I also suspect that NTSC video is a factor. You get sharp pixels from an emulator, but on real hardware the image is much softer. And I'm using the composite video connector, whereas most TVs in the 80s would only have had an RF connection. If you'd like to try Deep Dungeon Adventure, I'll put a link to a copy of the MSX version that runs in the browser. You can of course also try out my Nabu build. You'll need a Nabu emulator and the server software that's used to load programs onto it. For more information, check out the GitHub page. Thanks for watching.